Hey guys, Susan Thomas here, and today I want to talk to you about working with hammers. So you've started making jewelry and you've decided you want to get into metal work. Great, but the first thing you find out is that there are a lot of hammers involved in working with metal. What do I do with all these anyway? I mean, seriously. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about what to do with some of the basic hammers that you need to use when you get started working with metals. So first of all, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about what some of these hammers are. I don't have a lot here, I'm just starting you with 3, so you should be able to remember and kind of follow along pretty easily and get started working with your metal. First of all, I want you to understand that this is not a new hammer. It is my hammer, but I did bring my hammer because I wanted to show you guys that I use this all the time. This is a Rawhide Mallet. What I use it for is to flatten out metals or to smooth out rings. Like this is a bangle. You can see this one's kind of misshapen right now, and I'm gonna reshape this with my Rawhide Mallet, but it's not gonna mar the metal. And so that's why I use that all the time. Also, I can flatten out pieces of metal so that they're not curved like this without affecting the texture on the metal. To me, the next most important hammer in my hammer arsenal is a chasing hammer. If you look at this chasing hammer, it's got this kind of domed flat end on it, and that's great for dapping, which is flattening and hardening metals, also for texturizing. And then on the other side, it's got this little ball peen end, which is also great for texturing. I also like to use it for riveting. So this is a great little hammer. I use it all the time. The last one I have is a texturing hammer, and I'm going to show you this way so you can see the head of this hammer. This one's also mine, and you can see it's also very well used. This side has kind of a lined texture, and then on the other side I have kind of a checkerboard texture. So these are great for putting different textures on your metals. There's lots of these hammers out there with different textures on them. Some of them even have like 9 different heads and 9 different textures, but this is one of my favorites. I found that a lot of textures tend to look pretty similar on metal, so I kind of stick to some basics. So I love this one because it's just got the lines and the checkerboards. So those are the 3 hammers that I'm going to be working with today. I also have a bench block here. You're gonna need a bench block if you're working with hammers because it's a nice flat smooth surface, and you don't want to put a texture on the back side of whatever you're working with when you're hammering. So this is a great little steel bench block that you can work with. I'm also going to be using a ring stick just to hammer on. This is a steel ring stick, and I'm gonna be using a steel bracelet mandrel. And then the metal I'm working with today is sterling silver and copper. I've got some bangles that I've started here. I'm gonna show you how to flatten those out and shape them and texturize them. I've got some little stack rings that I made, and then just some flat metal that I can show you those textures on, and then some pieces of metal that I cut out of copper. First of all, I'm going to talk to you about the first hammer, which is my Rawhide Mallet. Now, if you get one of these, yours is going to be nice and new and pretty, I promise, but after you use it for a long time like me, it is going to take on its own little shape, kind of like your personality. This is sort of like me right there. So I'm going to take my bracelet, and this is just a bangle that I have soldered, and I haven't done anything else to it yet except clean it up. So what I'm going to do is put that onto this mandrel, and I'm going to use the mandrel and my Rawhide Mallet to shape this up back into a circle. So what you want to do is just kind of hammer around, and you can either turn the bracelet or you can turn the mandrel, whichever is easier depending on your workstation. So I'm just going to continue to hammer that, and I'm pushing it up on the mandrel to keep it that nice round shape. All right, so now what I've done is I've made this into a pretty circle without putting any texture on my piece. Now, similarly to that, I'm going to take this little piece of metal, and you can see how it's kind of bumpy and sticking up. I cut that out with a pair of shears, and I want to flatten that out without putting any texture on it. So I'm going to use my Rawhide Mallet just to flatten that out on my bench block. See that? So now it's nice and flat. I'm going to do the same thing on one of these rings on my ring stick, make this kind of round, and that way I'll have a nice round ring to start with when I texturize it. Now, it's also a little bit bumpy, kind of like my piece of metal was, so I'm going to put it on to the metal and hammer that as well. So now you know one thing really important about hammers, and that's that they're a little bit noisy. So next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you guys about the chasing hammer. Now these are not all created equal. Sometimes they'll have a really flat surface here. I like the ones that have a little bit of a dome on them because I find that they're just a little bit more forgiving. So if you're buying a chasing hammer or picking up a chasing hammer, you're gonna wanna look for one that has a little bit of a dome on it, especially if you're a beginner. The first thing I'm gonna do with this is I'm gonna use it to do something called dapping. What dapping does is it flattens the wire, but it also strengthens it. So I have made myself a little pair of ear wires here, and I made them out of 20 gauge sterling silver wire. And 20 gauge is not a very thick wire. It's under 1 millimeter, and so it can be a little bit, I guess, too forgiving, meaning I can pull on this, like if somebody wore this in their ear, they could easily bend it and it would become misshapen. And I don't want that. I want it to stay this beautiful shape that I made. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna dap the curve right here to make it a little bit stronger so that when somebody uses it or puts it in their ear, it's gonna keep that shape. So to dap it, what I'm gonna do is just right here at this curve, I'm gonna take this flat side of my chasing hammer and I'm just gonna hammer that. And I'm gonna show you the difference. So this one's kind of flattened at the curve and this one is not. And so now when I pull on this, it strengthens the metal. And this one is not super strong. See how it kind of loses its shape? And so I'll do the same thing to that one. I also like to use this side to do some texturizing along the edges of my pieces of metal. I cut this out with a shear, and so it's a little bit sharp on the edges. And I can file it if I want to, but you can also use this little edge right here, or this one to kind of dap along the side and make a little texture that will take off some of that rough edge on the back. So I'm just gonna kind of go around the edge of this piece of metal and make a little texture, kind of a finish on this piece of metal. So you can see I've got kind of like a little edge right there. I'm gonna do the same thing along this side. And then, if I want to, with the other side, I can use that little ball peen end to put a texture in the center. This is one of my favorite textures. But now it doesn't have that rough edge along the back because I've taken that dapping hammer and kind of dapped along the sides. So it's not rough along the back. And I also have that nice texture on the inside. Last thing I want to show you is how you can use this side to put some kind of flat places on your metal. So I'm just going to use this part right here and I'm going to flatten this bracelet in several different spots, creating a texture. So what I can do is just hit it here. I told you it was going to get loud in here. So see how I kind of put a flat, smooth place right there? And then I can turn this and do it again. And now I've got like the rounded and the flat smooth, and I can turn it again. Same thing. So I'm just kind of creating a texture on this piece. And if I want to, I can use this to strengthen up this bracelet. Now this is also going to put a texture on it, but it will strengthen this up. So what I can do is I can use this to strengthen the outside of this. Now what it will do, because I'm hitting it with metal, it's also gonna make it a little bit larger. So for some reason you made a bangle that was a little bit small and you didn't mind adding a little bit of texture, you can use that metal against metal here to create a little bit larger piece. So I'll show you kind of what happens. So this is rounding it out just like I did with the Rawhide Mallet, but it's creating a pretty texture on the outside. You can see I'm kind of pulling it up as I go because it's actually expanding as the metal hits the metal. So think metal on metal makes things bigger and expands the size. Rawhide on metal does not. But see how round it is? And then I would just put this back on my bench block and hit it with my Rawhide Mallet again to kind of flatten it out. So it's a nice round bangle, and I really like that one, so I'm gonna add it to my stack. Let's work a little bit with our texturing hammer. So I love this one because it puts this really great shiny texture on your pieces. It's a little bit rough, and this one's really fun because it just puts some little lines on there. Now, when you use a texturing hammer, because it's metal, and I'm gonna use it against another piece of metal, it is going to expand the size of my piece. So these little rings, right now I'm gonna push this up my ring mandrel. That's a size 7. Generally speaking, when I'm done texturizing this, it's gonna be about a size 8. I'm gonna take the line side here, and I'm just gonna hit this, and I'll show you the texture that it gets when I get done. So I'm gonna hit, I'm gonna turn it. I usually do this in my lap, so it's a little bit harder to do over my table, but easier for you guys to see. So I'll just try not to hit my finger. So see how much bigger it's gotten even? All I've done is gone around it just about half a time there. Keep going. And if I want to, I can just hit it with my Rawhide Mallet, just a little bit to round it up, and take that off. And so see, that has a really cool kind of lined texture on it. And we put that one to the side and get another one. Let's see what size this one is. Should be a 7 also. Yeah, it is. Now I'm gonna take this side and I'm gonna show you what texture this gets. Now this one, I am just going to hammer all the way around until it's a size 8. So now it's a size 8, and I take that off, and both of these guys are just a little bit wavy, so I'm gonna go back to my Rawhide Mallet, and now you can see the difference in the textures there. So this one's kind of real shiny and rough, and this one has those nice little lines on it. See the difference? And if you want to, because I use sterling silver, what you can do with this is you can take some liver of sulfur and you can oxidize these a little bit. I've got these right here oxidized on my finger. Makes them a little bit darker, and it also brings out the texture in your rings. Now I'm gonna take just this little piece of copper here, and I'm gonna hit this with all 3 different textures that I've shown you today so you guys can really see the difference. Thanks so much for watching. If you guys would like to pick up some supplies like the ones I worked with today, check out the links down below. Is there any other type of hammer you'd like to learn about? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you again next time.